Hi, my name's Katie. I am a full-time working mum of two gorgeous little girls, and I'm making these videos for my sister Emily, who lives on the other side of the world, so I don't bombard her with information and advice whilst I am FaceTiming with her every time. So I'm not professional. I'm very much just slapdash, just making these so I can provide that advice to my sister. As is tradition with being a full-time working parent, I am juggling 20 things at the same time. I'm folding laundry, so I'm going to be doing that in the background. One baby is downstairs napping, who will inevitably wake up, and the other baby's at swim class. So here we are. Let's see how far we get on. Today I'm going to talk about postpartum. The fact that it has the same name, postpartum, for everyone who gives birth is ridiculous, because the experience is so different for everyone, and can be such different levels of experiences. Anyone that you will talk to will have had such a vastly different experience, and that makes it really difficult to prepare for, makes it really difficult to shop for, and makes it really hard at the time to feel like this is normal and this is how it's meant to be. I had relatively straightforward births, and that's always a weird term, because obviously it didn't feel straightforward at the time, but I had 2 vaginal births with no tearing and no stitches. I'm extremely lucky. I'm very grateful that that was the experience I had. It meant that my postpartum experience was much quicker, much easier, I imagine, and I was able to do things much quicker. I would also say there's a big difference between my first and my second. Mainly because when I had my second, I also had a toddler. My kids are very close in age. They're only 20 months apart. So I had a 20-month-old who I still had to look after, and obviously plenty of help. I had the most incredible husband who was there and able to do everything, but it doesn't take that way. So they were definitely different experiences, but I was very lucky that both times they were quite straightforward. That's not the norm. That's not what everyone experiences. If you've had a C-section, that's a whole different kettle of fish. I can't really talk to that experience, obviously, because I haven't had it. And I would say that, like, if you do end up having a C-section, Emily, then, like, try and find a video on YouTube of someone who has been through that, and they could probably provide more advice. I weirdly kind of just didn't prepare in advance for the fact that I might have a C-section. And it sounds silly, like I didn't read that chapter of the baby book. I was quite scared by it, and in my second pregnancy, and I'll do separate videos on my birth stories for each, but there was a possibility that I might have, or they asked if I would like to have an elective C-section, and I felt really ill-informed, and I think maybe I should have been more informed, but anyway, I didn't have one, so I guess it kind of didn't really make a difference. But so I had 2 vaginal births. I stayed in hospital for 2 nights after birth the first time, and 1 night after birth the second time. I'll do a separate video on hospital bag and what to pack for that. And that is kind of a slightly different experience. But so I guess, well, okay. I mean, like, I think a lot of these things apply for when you're in the hospital, whenever you come home as well, I guess. But like, I'm basically going to talk about like the things that you need for the healing bit, and the vagina bit, basically. Things in terms of clothes, kind of stuff that you want to be wearing, and feeding. I breastfed both my kids, and so my point of view and my advice and everything is focused around that. That's not any judgment on people who formula feed. This is just the experience that I have, and therefore can provide advice on. So those are the bits that I'm going to kind of talk about and cover, and then a little bit on terms of like how it was, I guess. So what I would definitely recommend like reading up about and knowing about is postpartum bleeding. So you basically have a period after you've given birth. I believe even if you have a C-section, I think it's still the same, because it's a period. It's not like bleeding from having given birth. So you basically will have a very, very heavy period. So I bought adult nappies, and I would strongly recommend these, okay? So I got Always Discreet pants, and they're like pull-ups, so they're stretchy They come in very fashionable patterns. So I had like black ones, which, I mean, it is kind of is what it is. They're scented, which is quite nice. So they smell quite nice. They made my hospital bag smell very nice. And yeah, they're just big, thick nappies. And so I wore those, and I would change them kind of every kind of half day, every 6 hours, I guess, whatever. So 2 in the day and 2 in the night. And I wore those for the first 3 days, both times. It just meant that I could take that off and chuck it in the bin. I didn't have to deal with anything. I didn't have to faff when you're in the hospital. So I had my first baby during lockdown 3 in the UK. So my husband wasn't allowed to stay in the hospital with me the whole time. He was only allowed to come for visiting hours. With my second baby, he was allowed to be there the whole time because it was out of COVID, but we had another baby, so he had to go home and look after her. My mum was around, our mum was around to help look after our first, but still, like, my husband went home to go and like check in on her and make sure that everything was okay. So when I went to the toilet, had to be quite quick because I was leaving the baby in the little bassinet thing. In the UK, we don't have nurseries or anything, so the baby's with you the whole time. So I would kind of have to nip to the loo or bring her, like, wheel her with me. So in the UK, I was in a ward of 6 beds, and then each room with the 6 beds in it had its own bathroom, which was great. And like, you really can just like leave your baby and nip to the loo. It's not a problem. And like, they do sleep a lot at the beginning. So that wasn't a particularly stressful experience for me. But I guess my point is having the nappy to just be able to like take off and chuck was just like very straightforward, very easy, and weirdly kind of made me feel a bit cleaner. It's such a weird experience. Like, straight afterwards, you feel disgusting, you feel like so sweaty, so gross, but you also have just been through this like horrendously traumatic experience. But like, I definitely felt like I just wanted to feel clean, and that was quite hard. And actually then the day after I'd given birth both times, like once my husband was allowed in and came to visit and was able to sit with the baby, I went and had a shower. And oh my gosh, if you're comfortable to be able to stand, I would strongly recommend having a shower within 24 hours, like at the hospital, like, or if you're home by then, obviously. But that was one of the nicest showers. And I brought really nice, I'll obviously talk about this in the hospital bag video, like I brought really nice toiletries. Like I got Aqua de Parma, like really fancy shampoo and conditioners. And it smelled amazing, it felt amazing. It was one of those like magical showers that you remember for life. So I would definitely recommend doing that. But having that shower was lovely. But yeah, so having adult nappies for those first couple of days was, I thought, really, really useful. Once I got home, however, I didn't then want to be like walking around in nappies. Once you're like stood up and doing things, it's quite uncomfortable. But if you're sat in a hospital bed, being in nappies kind of doesn't really matter. But so I wouldn't buy a massive bag. I bought 1 packet, and I think it came with 14. And I didn't finish the packet over both kids. So I think there was still a couple left in that I gave to a friend after I'd had my second baby. So I wouldn't buy too many of those, is my point there. So then once I was kind of finished, as it were, with the adult nappies after kind of 3 days, I then went on to maternity pads. Again, these are like mega, mega thick, panty, like period pads type thing. But make sure you get specifically maternity ones or postpartum ones, because they're much softer. If you've had stitches or anything, and to be honest, even if you haven't, everything down there is so sore and so sensitive that a normal period pad can be quite rough and can be quite sore. So the maternity ones are especially made to be really, really soft. I literally got Boots own brand ones. You don't need to get like particularly fancy ones. And again, get the smallest packet you can, because I was then wearing those. They're very, very thick. And again, like if you're walking, they're quite like crinkly and kind of, you're quite aware of them. So I wore those for maybe 3 days, maybe 5 days. And then because I hadn't had stitches or anything, I wasn't as sore. So I then switched to normal period pads, and then basically reduced the amount of absorbency until after 3 weeks, which sounds like a long time, but it is. I was then on just panty liners, and I wore those then. I mean, I wore panty liners every day probably for the first 6 months postpartum. I stopped bleeding at around 6 weeks postpartum. But your pelvic floor, or my pelvic floor, wasn't quite where it was beforehand. If I laughed, if I sneezed, if I coughed, I would sometimes trickle. And so I wore panty liners because of that. Also, there was just a lot more discharge than I was expecting. And I feel like I just didn't really, it just felt like there was just gunk coming out of me all the time for like 6 months, which was really disgusting. So I wore panty liners every day for 6 months. So if you're gonna buy anything in bulk, buy panty liners in bulk, I guess is my point. But everything else, just buy in small quantities. So buy the smallest pack of adult nappies, the smallest pack of maternity pads, and then like I just had some pads left over from kind of having my period beforehand. But otherwise what I would say is like just get small packs of things. And again, like there are supermarkets, there are shops, like your other half can nip to the shop and go and get you things. But I would have a couple of packs. So I would say like have the nappies, the thickest maternity pads, and then like normal heavy absorbency period pads in the house beforehand. And then you can you've got yourself covered for those first couple of weeks. So for most people, I think it is normal to bleed between like 3 to 8 weeks of like a heavy period, which is mental. And again, like I kind of knew it would sort of happen, but I wasn't necessarily fully prepared for like how much bleeding there was going to be. So that's the bleeding bit, and that's kind of what you wore. Oh, so then that kind of ties into, so the other thing that I did buy, and actually, so I bought for my first and then not necessarily regretted, but didn't use with my, like when I had my second, was I bought really cheap granny pants from Primark in like size large, thinking that like you're not pregnant anymore, but your belly doesn't go away for like 3 to 4 weeks, is like your uterus is still contracting and it's still going down. So like when the baby comes out, like obviously it's like you've deflated the balloon a bit, but it doesn't go back to like how you were before you had the baby. So you normally are like, I would say like that first day, you're like back to what you were like 6 months pregnant. Then maybe a week later, you're like 5 months pregnant. A week later, you're like 4 months pregnant. And then for like another 3 weeks or so, you're like varyingly getting down, depending on obviously like what your experience is. It's different for everyone, but that's sort of what it's like. So I wasn't really back into like quote unquote normal clothes. And even then, like you don't know what size you're going to be. You don't know how much weight you've gained, all this kind of stuff. But like with my second pregnancy, so I didn't gain any weight at all, which is all a bit weird, but I had gestational diabetes, so I had to go on quite a strict diet, so effectively lost weight, which was a little bit odd. But so a month or so after I'd given birth, I was like back in my normal clothes. I mean, not in like my normal jeans pre having either of my kids, but like I was in like my normal leggings and things like that. So my point is, I bought these big pants thinking if they get disgusting, if they get covered in blood, they get covered in whatever, I can just chuck them out. I won't care about them. They'll be nice and big, which will be really handy because I don't know how big or small I'm going to be after I've had the baby. And they're massive, big, like granny pants, so they can handle the big maternity pads. Problem is because I bought cheap ones from Primark, they were really uncomfortable, and like the stitching was itchy and I hated them and I felt horrible. And like you already feel so unglamorous, you already feel so disgusting, like gunk is coming out of every part of your body. The last thing you need to then be wearing is like absolutely horrible pants as well. So what I would say instead is like maybe buy different ones, because you might want to buy a size up than what you normally wear, or even 2 sizes up from what you normally wear, but buy like soft, silky, stretchy. So actually I would say something like this, like really soft, silky, these ones are from M&S, like soft, silky pants that are like nice stitching, nice and soft, gonna feel like they're, so your tummy and everything just feels like really wibbly. All your organs have been pushed up, moved out of the way to make space for the baby, and then they don't all go straight back into place straight away. So you have this like really weird feeling where like everything feels like wibbly, and like if you don't kind of hold it tight, it kind of is all gonna like fall. It's really hard to explain, but basically like actually having something that was like comfortable and like went a bit high rise over my stomach, I found really comfortable. And then like if you buy new ones, then you can chuck them, or even if you've got comfy ones, wear them. So I guess my point is, on my first with my first baby, I was like, oh, I've got to buy granny pants, I've got to buy these. Actually, I would buy soft, nice, comfy pants, but make sure that they're big enough to put maternity pads in. So that's kind of important in that. Okay, so then in terms of things like stitches and all that kind of stuff, as I said, like I didn't have those, so didn't need anything in particular. It therefore wasn't particularly stingy or sore or anything down there. But what I did buy in preparation is witch hazel pads, or Tux is the brand, I think. And they're like little circle cotton pads, like this sort of thing, but that are like pre-soaked in soft witch hazel. And basically you put those in your pad, like on top of your pad, and it's just like a cooling sensation on your hoo-ha, so it's not too stingy. Basically you just want anything cold. So the other thing is, if you look up, I think they're called pad popsicles or something, but it's like you basically can just put aloe vera or witch hazel or something like onto maternity pads and then put them in the fridge so they're like prepped and cold and everything. All of that stuff is really good. Like, you live close enough to shops that it's not like you need to order these things super far in advance. Like, if you live in the arse end of nowhere, then like, you know, get these things so that you've got them in the house. But like, I mean, I live in central London, so I just don't have this issue at all. But like, even you, Emily, who live in Canada, like, you still have shops. Like, you can go to the shop and buy if you need. So I wouldn't stock up. There's loads of things of like, oh, you need to have a peri bottle. You need to have prepped all these popsicle things in the freezer, all this kind of stuff. Like, you don't know what you're going to need until you've had your baby and you know what experience you've had. And like, you could end up just spending so much money. Like, I bought all these witch hazel pads, I bought these Tux things, and like, made popsicles, whatever, and it's like I didn't need any of them, and I ended up just having to like give that stuff away, which is fine obviously, but like I don't know, like you could end up having a C-section and then you need a completely different set of stuff. Like, you'll need stuff for your scar and all this kind of thing. So don't stress too much about having too much of that. I would just have the maternity pads and stuff in, and then know what stuff you might get if you have stitches, and then just send your other half to go and get it, or order it online like a normal person. Like, it'll be fine. Like, not everything has to be prepared in advance. And also, you'll have the same that I had, is that like, our mum is going to be there, she's going to be with you, and so just send her out to go and buy whatever you need. You don't have to have everything sorted in advance, is my point on that. So then the other thing that I did get, which I actually used towards the end of pregnancy and through the beginning of maternity, which was really useful, is something which I call a puppy pad, but is, I think, technically called a flat pad sheet. But it's basically, and you'll see them in the hospital as well, but it's like a big A1 sized sheet that is like blue plastic on the bottom and absorbent on the top. So it's like a giant pad, like period pad type thing. And I think it's called a puppy pad because you put them on the floor and then the puppies wheeze on them. But I put them from about 36 weeks, 37 weeks. I had one of those on my bed. So if my water's broken the night or something, it wouldn't ruin my mattress. I also, which I would recommend doing as well, I bought a big shower curtain, like a super cheap one from the supermarket, and put that over the top of my mattress protector, but underneath my bed sheet, over, so that, and again, like if my water broke in the night, it wouldn't ruin the mattress. My waters broke in bed with my first pregnancy. It was a really small amount, and I was on a puppy pad thing, which was really useful, and I absorbed it. With my second, they didn't go until I got to the hospital, but I was really worried about that happening again, which is why I was kind of prepared in that way. So a bed sheet was, the shower curtain was then like quite a cheap way of doing that. But the puppy pads were really good because I would have those in the bed, and then I would also have one, like we'd just bought a brand new armchair, and my husband was really worried about my waters breaking on the armchair if I ever sat in it. And so I had one of those on that, and I had one in the car as well, because again, like car seats kind of thing that like, oh my God, I can't imagine anything worse than having to like clean the car seat the week after I had a baby. So I then had one of those in the car as well. I had a couple extra ones in my hospital bag as well. I went to the hospital. When we had our second baby, I went in Uber to go, London life, went in Uber to the hospital to go and get like a checkup in the middle of the night whilst I was in labour. And so I put the puppy pad on the seat in the car so that the taxi driver would feel more comfortable taking me. And so then after I'd had the baby, I then had, again, same thing, just had that everywhere, because so I had an epidural with my first, and so like, yes, I had most feeling back, but some bits were just still a bit numb. And so I wouldn't have necessarily felt, I don't think, if I'd like leaked out of my period pad or leaked out of my nappy or something. And so I then had those mats again, like I had one in bed, in case I bled in the night or anything. I had one like on my armchair and one in the car, and things that kind of went anywhere. It's just that kind of extra layer. They're super useful. They're also really useful because you're meant to give your baby some nappy free time every day. If your house is warm enough, one thing that's quite nice to do is put a puppy pad down and then let the baby just have like 5-10 minutes, if it's warm enough, of just kind of like lying on that. And then if they wee all the bloody time or poo or anything, you can just chuck the pad away. You're not then having to like either have them having that naked time on a changing mat, which is kind of a bit restrictive, and it's also often quite cold, or they're kind of weeing on the towel or weeing on the play mat or whatever you've got them on. So I found those kind of puppy pad things really useful. So I would say get some of those. I think I got some on Amazon. I got a pack of 25, and I had to get a second pack when I had my second baby because I just used them all the time. They were wonderful. Okay, so that is sort of everything that I bought in advance for the healing process for the vagina bit. You kind of got to wait and see what your birth is like, and then know what else you might need. So yeah, that's sort of what I'd say on that. So then clothing wise, we talked a bit about granny pants and kind of what to have. The other item I would say is an absolute must have without fail is a soft cotton bathrobe or dressing gown, whatever you call them, but like a thin stretchy one. And if you can, get one that has like 3/4 sleeves. I got a cheap one from Primark and I got it in a big size, and it was just the best thing ever. When you're in hospital, you really just don't want to be faffing around getting dressed all the time. It's so hot on the maternity ward, on the post-labour ward, that it's miserable if you're in too many clothes anyway. And you're feeding so often that to be in a robe where you can just kind of pull it to one side and pop the baby on is just so much easier even than like a shirt or anything. So you're feeding it when like those first couple of days, the first couple of weeks, you're feeding, if you're breastfeeding, every 2 hours, but that 2 hours is from the start of the feed, and a feed could last for 45 minutes. So you're effectively feeding every hour and 15 minutes for 45 minutes. So being in something that makes it very easy to feed all the time, and that is very easy to stop feeding, and for when the nurses and midwives and things kind of do their circulations, if they're like, can we just see you latch on? It's just so easy. And then when you're home, it's also then just like much more comfortable being in a robe. And yeah, I would just really recommend one. Also, if you're if it's super like if you're getting hot and cold quite easily, it's very easy to take on and off. Because quite normal thing to happen after you've had your baby is to get like full night sweats, but to a point of like drench the bed. I didn't have this, but a lot of my friends did. And so being able to like take the robe off really easily instead of having to like take off layers of clothing, it's quite useful. So a stretchy robe. And then stretchy clothing generally. So I bought, again from Primark, just some like big stretchy pajamas. So I got some like stretchy night shirts that had buttons down. So again, really easy for feeding. Stretchy pajama bottoms, like anything that was kind of like mostly loose and stretchy, but had like a stretchy waistband or something. So you kind of weren't having to faff with a drawstring. You kind of want things that kind of hold you but aren't tight. And yeah, like stretchy material stuff is just like, you can stretch it down to feed, you can stretch it out, you can stretch it around the baby is the other thing. So that's the other thing with like a dressing gown, is that like you can put the baby inside it too to do skin to skin, and then put the dressing gown over both of you if you get like a big size, and that's really nice. And then you can keep kind of both of you warm inside of that. And again, like even with like a stretchy pajama top, like the baby's so small that I would just like tuck her inside the top with me and keep us both warm together, and like allow us to do skin to skin, which is really lovely. So just like generally stretchy stuff. So I only wore stretchy kind of pajama-y things or bathrobe in hospital. And then when I came home for the first week, again, like just wore stretch clothes and pajama-y things. Then, and like basically stayed at home for that first week. I think on day 5, we went for our first walk and kind of got out the house. And I think I literally just put Ugg boots on with my pajamas and stretchy clothes. And then after week 1, I then was like, right, okay, I want to kind of get up and do things and kind of be a bit more active. That's really when it kicked in of like, right, I want to start showering every day. I want to start feeling clean. I want to put on clean clothes and things like that. It was definitely like a turning point for me, I think, at that point. And then I just wanted things that were stretchy and comfortable, but also held me together. So I mentioned before that like your belly just kind of is like very wibbly, very loose, and it kind of feels like it's going to fall over. So I got a postpartum belly band, which is like it looks like a waist trainer, that it's like a bit of Velcro that goes over like this, and then you can like pull it tighter over thing. And it basically runs from like the top of your groin all the way to like just below your ribs. I found that super comfortable. It is not for everyone. I just got one on Amazon, and I wore it basically any time I got dressed. So I would normally like get up, try and like aim to get dressed by like 10 a.m. type thing. So it felt like there was structure to my day. And so like put the belly band on then when I was getting dressed, and then I would take it off again in the evening. Sometimes if we'd like, so with my second baby, we did way too much. We were just about to move house. We were finishing off the renovation at the new house, and it was an incredibly, incredibly stressful time for us. But so I was like 2-3 days after giving birth, we were in a paint shop choosing paint for the front door and things like that. It was an incredibly stressful time. We were just doing way too much. And so I really found though that like if we were having a very active day and I needed to be like out and about and doing lots of errands, it was quite uncomfortable to be in all day. Whereas if I was at home, like with my first, like chilling out on the sofa or just had friends around, I found it quite comfortable. I believe it's a myth that it actually does anything to like help get things back in place. I don't think it made a difference, but I found from a comfort level, it made me feel much more comfortable. So if that sounds like something you would quite like, I quite like to have like high-waisted leggings, things that are tight around here anyway. So I kind of knew that it would be something that I would like. If that's not your bag at all, then it may not be for you. But see how you feel. And then so on that, so then I really wanted to have things that were going to be tight around my waist with like a baggy jumper type thing over the top, because I liked to have everything feeling like it was being like held in place. So I bought 2 pairs of leggings that were like the size up from what I was before pregnancy, with like big waistbands and stretchy ones. my leggings that were the size I was before pregnancy were too tight, and that was really uncomfortable if I wore those for too long. It kind of made me feel a bit sick. But so you want tight but not too tight is, I guess, the point of that. So I very much was like full pajamas week 1, stretchy baggy clothes week 2, and then into like leggings and jumper type vibe then. So I had my babies in October and February, so both times was kind of wintry. I have no idea what I would have worn in the summer. I really just don't have any helpful advice, and that's okay because you're having your baby in March, so, and you live in a much colder country, so it's gonna be the same as me. So I would say the same thing of like leggings and jumpers is definitely what I wanted to be wearing after that point. And I say jumpers is obviously not a very helpful thing to say actually, because if you are breastfeeding, as I was with both mine, everything needed to be able to be open, and zips on zippy hoodies was not the one, because I was really worried that they would be cold zips but also like rub on the girls' faces. So I had like I had a lot of shirts, which were useful, but what I had, which was way better, actually I've got one here, is I bought like nursing tank tops. So these have like clips here so you can feed. So I had 4 of these, and I basically would wear leggings, one of those, a big baggy t-shirt, and then like a big drapey cardigan type thing. You can then pick up the t-shirt, unbutton the vest, and then feed. And so your stomach is still covered because you've got the vest top on, but you're not having to wear everything that's a shirt, and like not having to buy a load of new stuff. The other thing I would do is wear those, and then wear like one of my husband's t-shirts, which were much bigger as well. So that was quite useful. So I like had some shirts and like some like crossover tops, but I really wouldn't bother buying. I definitely wouldn't bother buying nursing clothing apart from those vest tops, because they're a scam. They look disgusting. You're never going to wear them afterwards. When you get to the end of feeding, so I fed both of mine I fed my first for 11 months and my second, I still feed her once a day actually, and she's over 1. But so let's sort of call it a year for each of them. I'm so done with nursing clothes. I'm so ready to not have to wear anything that even vaguely feels nursing appropriate. I wear a hoodie at every opportunity now because it is so nice to be able to wear things that I haven't been able to wear for a year. So if I had spent money on nursing clothes, I would never want to wear them again, is how I feel. So I really wouldn't waste money or effort on like nursing tops and nursing dresses and things, unless you have specific events to go to. And even then, like, so with my second, with her christening, I found this beautiful dress I could not feed in at all. It was incredibly impractical. But it was fine because when I needed to feed her, I just went to the bathroom, literally took the dress off, sat, fed her, and then put the dress back on and carried on the party, because I was like, well, I don't want to buy a dress I'm never going to wear again, when actually I got a dress I really like and I just made it work. So it'll be fine. So yeah, but I would definitely get the nursing tank tops because I wear those every single day and have done for a year, and still actually wear them after I finish feeding because they're then just tank tops. And then nursing bras, again, like if you're breastfeeding, I would get not like bras, I would get like soft, so these are my favorite kind, like soft, stretchy, I mean, Bravado is my favorite brand for nursing bras, I cannot recommend enough. These like soft t-shirty style bras, your boobs go from being so heavy to being so deflated and back again every like 10 minutes. And being in like, I mean, you definitely don't want to be in anything underwired or anything like that. But being in anything uncomfortable is just going to be miserable. So soft, stretchy things I would definitely recommend. If you, like Emily, do not have massive boobs, genuinely just like stretchy bralettes that you can like pull down are absolutely fine. Like, you definitely don't need to be buying specific nursing bras. I've obviously got quite big boobs, so I definitely needed the extra support, and when I was full of milk and needed to feed, I think if I'd have been in anything like not structured and not nursing appropriate, it just wouldn't have worked. I was also out and about a lot, so needed to feed a lot in public, and having easy clip down bras was super, super handy. The other thing which I, given I'm doing laundry, was hoping, that I was going to be able to show you, is the other thing that you can get, which isn't specifically nursing. So these are my sports bras. These are Under Armour. I think I say that. Oh no, sorry. These ones are Brooks, but I also have Under Armour ones. A lot of sports bras nowadays have Velcro so that you can tighten them and stretch them. But what that also means is you can take it like that and feed in them. So these are excellent when I started doing exercise and things. Again, so I didn't need to buy nursing specific sports bras, which are a thing, but also these are quite good if I need the extra support, if like my soft nursing bras are too soft. I just feel like I'm going to be standing up and walking all day or whatever, and or if I'm particularly heavy or whatever, being in that is so much more comfortable, because it's like being in a sports bra all day, so it just kind of holds everything a bit more in place, but it's also super easy to feed in, but isn't any more expensive than a normal sports bra, because what you will find is nursing stuff is more expensive. Also means that when you stop nursing, these I now sleep in, because it's nice and like soft to have I'm weird, I couldn't sleep with no bra or anything, so I just sleep in like soft sports bras. So I sleep in my soft nursing bras. And then these are just normal sports bras, right? So I just still wear them for sport. So very useful. So that's what I would say about clothing for postpartum. And then like you'll get into a rhythm, you start to work out what you kind of like to wear and what's comfortable. But like that's basically what I'd say for the beginning. And then I've sort of kind of covered off feeding, because I kind of talked about that in the same thing. But in terms of what to prep for feeding in preparation for the postpartum phase, breastfeeding is one of these things, and I'll do a separate video on breastfeeding, but there isn't any amount of preparedness you can do that is going to actually prepare you for what feeding is like. It's just, like I watched all these videos about like how natural it is, and it's gonna be this easy process, and the baby just knows where your nipple is, and they just know how to latch on. Oh my gosh, I had such a different experience, and it was so hard, and I actually have one inverted nipple, and so couldn't feed on one side. And it was really, really stressful. Managed to get through it all, and like managed to continue feeding, as I say, both my girls for a year each. And we got there, and that's amazing, and I'm super proud of that. But like, it was not easy. It was not an easy experience, and it's really hard to prepare for. The other thing that I would say is, I talked about kind of like postpartum bleeding, and it being this thing of like, have a few things in the house, but like, you can always pop to the shop if it's like, oh, okay, I need some more of the thick one or whatever. With breastfeeding and with like your boobs, basically, it's like nothing is wrong and then you're on fire and you have a fever of 105. It's so quick and so extreme if there's a problem that you kind of have to be a bit more prepared. I had mastitis 3 times with my second pregnancy, and with my first, we just had like complications with feeding, as I mentioned, because of the inverted nipple. We weren't able to prepare for that. No one told me that was going to be an issue beforehand. I can do a separate video on that specifically if anyone's interested. Emily, you don't have that issue, so you're probably not going to be interested. But what's really hard is that, like, as I say, you feed every 2 hours and you feed 24 hours a day. And so in these first couple of weeks, like if you have a problem with a feed at 2 a.m, it is so many hours and so many feeds until you can get help. Because like, I mean, there are some 24-hour helplines, and make sure you know all the helpline numbers for your area. We obviously have the NHS, we also have NCT, La Leche League, but there's also, I'm sure, specific ones in Canada as well. Make sure you know the 24-hour helpline for that. Make sure before you leave hospital, you get the helpline for who the is for the lactation consultant, and have all of that. But even still, like, it's not like, oh, okay, well, that didn't work, that's okay. Like, you're also talking about feeding your baby. So they're hungry if it wasn't successful. Or like, if you're in pain, you have to still feed your baby. Like it's kind of brutal. Okay, so maybe not funny story or funny story depending on. Obviously I've changed outfits and I've changed location very suddenly in the middle of film. I suddenly realised halfway through filming that I was meant to be at swim class with my other baby, so quickly had to stop filming, take her to swim class, and on the way back from swim class, she was sick everywhere and quite a lot, and so I picked her up, held her whatever. She obviously then was sick all over me. And yeah, so it's been quite eventful. So then obviously met up with husband and other child, who is very funny because she's just talking. And so she's like, she was sick. She's sick. I'm like, yeah, well done. So anyway, the older one is now having her lunchtime nap and the younger one is having a nap on daddy, just to kind of monitor and make sure she's okay. But yes, so I'm now in a different location wearing a different outfit halfway through the film. But anyway, life is always an interesting, fun game as a parent. Okay, so yeah, so as I was saying, things with breastfeeding, it's good to be prepared for some of the things that might come up, because you can't necessarily always just pop out to the shop at 2 a.m. and get a solution. So the things that might happen that might mean that you like kind of need things. So you might be having trouble getting your baby to latch. This is basically like, can they latch on and kind of get a good feed? That's a common problem, and you definitely want to get support from a lactation consultant. Hospital should help when you're in there, like make sure you don't leave hospital until you feel confident that you can do that. But still, like sometimes it slips, or like the big one is like with my second baby, everyone was like, oh, you know what you're doing, you've done this before. But it's a different baby and you don't necessarily remember all of it. And like, I mean, my kids were pretty close together and still you just don't necessarily remember everything. And so it's really important to like make sure that that's checked and right and comfortable. And then even a couple of days later, it still might be something that you're kind of like struggling with. So that can then, if they're not latching properly, it's going to make it difficult for them to feed. This also can be quite painful for you. So if your nipple is hurting, that probably means it's a latch problem, and so you should probably get help. But obviously, in the meantime, so say that's 2 a.m, you've got to wait till 8 a.m, till 9 a.m, till someone's going to answer your calls or be able to get help or support. Or worse, there's a drop-in centre that you can drop into from 11 a.m. And not only do you have to feed until then, you also then have to work out how to get dressed, how to leave the house, how to go and do that. So nipple shields is one thing that I had that was super helpful. It's like a little plastic cover that goes over the top of your nipple. It basically creates a barrier between your baby and the nipple. That can allow you to successfully continue to feed until you can get support. So that's quite a good, quick solution. It was also something that if so I obviously had one side that I couldn't successfully feed on. One of the things we tried was putting a nipple shield on that because it created something for the baby to latch to. It didn't end up working for me, but it was quite a useful thing. The other thing that a nipple shield can be helpful for is if you have a very fast letdown. Letdown is when the milk comes out. So basically, nothing's happening, the baby latches on, kind of signals to your boob that milk should come, and then so your boob's like, oh, okay, we should make milk now, and then the milk comes, and that's called your letdown. And sometimes the milk will come really fast, and it's kind of like putting a baby to a fire hose, or like trying to drink from a fire hose. So it's kind of like immediately loads and loads of milk, and so sometimes it can like hit them in the back of the throat, and they can kind of splutter and choke and then kind of come off. Or it can make it really difficult for them to kind of swallow and catch their breath. So sometimes a nipple shield can be quite helpful to kind of slow down, because it effectively, you have like the holes coming out of your nipple that let the milk out, and then there's other holes in the nipple shield. So it kind of creates a bit of a kind of like barrier to stop too much milk coming out. So that can be quite useful as a kind of covers quite a few different issues that might happen. They're quite cheap as well. I think I got some for like £7 or something. The other thing that's really handy to have beforehand, and I actually took into the hospital with me, is nipple cream. There's loads of different ones. There's loads of organic ones, called more like nipple butters. There's kind of off-the-shelf ones. I don't think there's a huge amount in it, but all of them are safe to go in your baby's mouth, pretty much, or definitely all the ones in the UK are. because things have to be allowed on shelf, and I assume it would be the same in Canada. But maybe do a bit of research into the best one. And yeah, that's kind of like a numbing, like a thick pasty numbing cream that's quite good. So if you have any cuts or blisters, or I mean, this is really making it sound super appealing, but they can get quite dry and chapped, kind of like lips, and so you can put the kind of nipple butter or nipple cream or something on it, and that will kind of allow it to heal a bit. It's quite nice to put on straight after a feed, and then you've got a good kind of hour and 15, hour and 45 for them to kind of heal a bit before your next feed. If your baby has to go on 15 minutes later because they didn't have a successful feed or whatever, I'm pretty sure most of it, like double check this obviously, but it's fine for them to go in their mouth. The only thing I would say about nipple cream is it's very greasy. So if you then are wearing a top you like, it can stain that top. So the other thing that I would definitely recommend, and I mentioned it in my shopping video, but is breast pads. One thing that happens when you're feeding on one side is the other boob will often be like, oh, we need to make milk, and will let down as well. So you might have milk coming out the other side. Also when you're not feeding, but your baby wants to feed or you're ready for a feed. Anyway, all various times in the day, milk can dribble out of your boobs. So having reusable breast pads, which are like little round, like giant cotton wool rounds. I had reusable ones, which were like little bamboo ones I'd really recommend. So just go in the washing machine with all the rest of your stuff. But I had those in. They created a great barrier of the cream and whatever I was wearing, like my sports, my feeding bra and top and whatever. So those are really useful to have. The other thing which I had, which I would recommend, especially given my second time, I had mastitis, as I mentioned, which is basically where you get a blocked milk duct, and it can get quite swollen, hard, and you get a fever and it's infection. Two things have to happen. If you have a fever, you probably need to go on antibiotics, but you also need to get the blockage out. It's the worst thing to be told, but the best, most effective way to get the blockage out is for your baby to basically drink and encourage the milk to come, and it will get the blockage out. But when your breast is so sore and so inflamed, feeding is really painful. But yeah, so I mean, like full crying in lots of pain. Mastitis is not fun. So as soon as you feel like you might have a blocked duct, like speak to your doctor or whatever, but massage it and make sure you're putting your baby on quite regularly. Like, can I help? Anyway, the important thing that I was going to say was I got these microwavable heat pads that are specifically for boobs. So they're like in a donut shape. And it's those like thermo microbead things. So you put it in the microwave and it warms up. And then it's like a flat donut that you then put in your bra on both sides. And it just like warms and like heats up your boob basically. Very comforting, very nice. A warm bath also works very well. But these heat pads, they were amazing. Because yeah, just even if my boobs were a bit sore, like very swollen, I got engorged a couple of times, which is basically what happens before mastitis, which is you get very, very swollen. If your baby starts doing good sleeps in the night, so maybe you're getting kind of, once you're past the point of having to wake them up every 2 to 3 hours to feed, they then might start doing kind of 3 to 4 hours chunks. And the first couple of times that happens, your boobs are like rocks, like lumpy rocks, can be really sore. And the best thing to do is get your baby on and feed, but that can be very sore. So I would sometimes put the heat pack on to kind of like, not desensitize them, but kind of warm them up and soften them a little bit, and then put the baby on to then kind of drain them. You can do it with ice and use cold packs, but I always found that because when you get cold, your nipples get hard, it just kind of, if there were any cuts or sores or anything, it just kind of all made it very stingy. So I've always found that heat was really good. One kind of, I say odd wife tale, it's not. The doctor actually recommended it to me all the time, was cabbage leaves. So if you have a cabbage in the fridge and you peel off a leaf and then you put that in, not only does the cooling sensation feel nice, but there's some enzymes in the cabbage leaves that are meant to be really good for infections. So that is a really good thing to do. I didn't do it because, as I say, like, I just didn't really like the idea of cold things. But I ended up on antibiotics, so who am I to give you medical advice? But yeah, so I would have the heat pads. I mean, they don't need to be special breast ones. Like, I think I also have, and I know you have as well, like those little teddies that go in the microwave, or like those little pop hand warmer things. Like, obviously be careful, like don't put them straight onto your skin and things like that, but like anything that you can warm up that goes on your boobs is going to be nice, and it's just going to help. And that's the kind of thing that's like, everything feels fine, and then all of a sudden it's 2 a.m. and you're in agony and you're breaking a fever and you're like, what the fuck is happening? So if you've got those heat packs around, or at least you like know what you're going to use in a short-term fix, I think that is worth prepping for in advance. And then the last 2 bits, so Boppy Pillow, I talked about this in the other shopping video, and I will talk about it in the breastfeeding video as well. But Boppy Pillow is basically like a giant flight neck pillow, but it goes around your stomach to rest the baby on. This will save your back. I can't recommend it enough. I mean, my posture is awful. But yeah, I like anything that can make breastfeeding more comfortable and is gonna make you more likely to do it for as long as possible. And I'm a big advocate of, you know, you like, if you want to breastfeed, then you should, and you should do that for as long as you want. And so you don't want to be put off because it's hurting your back, or stopping because it's just uncomfortable. And so getting like good positions with the baby is also going to help their latch. Again, this is something that if you need help with at all, like if in the first month, I mean, if at any point in your breastfeeding journey, like if it is uncomfortable or painful, that probably means you're not doing it right. It's not meant to hurt. It's not meant to be uncomfortable. So it might just be that you need to change your position. It might be that you need to take the weight of the baby, so you're not holding them and feeding at the same time and putting all on your shoulders. Like, you need to position them differently. You need to have them facing a different way. You need to, work on your latch. You need to make sure they're kind of taking more of the boob in their mouth, kind of all these different things. There's so many things to get help on. But what I'm hoping, these are things that can hopefully help you at the 2 a.m. until you can get that proper help, because it's really important. So a Boppy Pillow I found super helpful. I also use my pregnancy pillow. This kind of ties into the last point, and I think I mentioned this before already, but the other thing that I kind of prepped in advance, and I guess was a big part of postpartum time, was having feeding stations. So I had one feeding station downstairs and one feeding station upstairs, which was originally in our bedroom, and then when she moved out of our bedroom, it was then in her bedroom. And so those were my kind of 2 stations. So if I ever needed to feed and we were in the house, I would go to the nearest station, as it were. And at that station, I had a tray on the kind of the side table, which had a filled water bottle, and it was my husband's responsibility to make sure that water bottle was always full. It had a phone charger and an iPad charger, and it had some lip balms and some hair ties. And like, obviously, if there's anything else that you think would be useful, those were just the things that kind of I thought of. I had my Boppy Pillow I had a Boppy Pillow upstairs, and my Boppy Pillow downstairs, and I had my pregnancy pillow upstairs. So at each station, I also had the cushion kind of ready there to go. So I would go sit at my station, get my pillow on, put baby in position. I had water there as I needed. I could plug my phone in or my iPad in to watch TV, or I'd make sure the TV remote was there. There's nothing worse than starting a feed that you know is going to be 45 minutes long and then realizing that the TV remote is out of reach and you can't do anything. So yeah, and like making sure you had a hair tie to kind of tie my hair out the way, because as your baby gets a bit older, they will start to claw at your neck, which is super fun and reminds you to cut their nails regularly. They'll also try and pull on your hair and kind of pull at whatever else they can reach. Another classic is the fingers in their mouth. They'll start reaching up and resting their fingers in your mouth, kind of clawing at you. It's all really magical. But yeah, so having those 2 stations set up, and I set them up in advance before the baby arrived, so I was ready for my postpartum. Those were my 2 stations. And yeah, like, as I say, like all of that just helped make that bit like much easier. So yeah, kind of have in mind where you're going to do your feeding, and make sure that those are kind of comfortable spaces are set up. Feeding takes up a huge amount of time. Yeah, like most of the time for the first couple of months, all you're doing is feeding and changing nappies. My husband had amazing paternity leave, so he was around. So I did input, he did output. I did the feeds, he did the changes. That's all we did pretty much solidly for the first month. Is you're just doing that on repeat all the time. Because if you take like a 2-hour period, so you start feeding at the beginning of that might take 40 to 45 minutes. Of that 45 minutes, you are going to switch halfway through. So you're going to feed for, let's say, maybe 20 minutes. They're then probably going to fall asleep. So you then want to give them a nappy change, which allows you to change their nappy, but also wake them up a little bit because it'll be cold, so they'll wake up a bit. You then put them on the other side, finish off the feed. So let's say that's 45 minutes of feeding, but you've had a nappy change in the middle. So you're now looking at like 50 minutes, maybe an hour. That's hit your baby's wake window. So they're now going to go back to sleep, and they're going to fall asleep on you, and they're going to sleep on you for that hour until they wake up and want feeding again. That then just repeats for 24 hours a day. Like, that is what happens. Every now and again, someone might come and take the baby for the hour whilst they're sleeping, or have them for the 10 minutes that they're awake after they've had their feed before they go back to sleep again. Like, and you get to run to the toilet or, you know, eat. But one thing that I did, which I would recommend, is once the baby was latched on and like in good position, she was normally pretty chill there, and like I knew it was going to be, I mean, I only fed on one side, so for my baby she would do 20 minutes, we'd change her nappy and then I'd put it back on the same side, but for everyone else you would normally then switch sides to the other side. But so once she was on, we were good for like 20 minutes. I would then get my husband to bring me food then, because I had a free hand, so I could eat toast with the other hand, or I could eat a sandwich, or I could rest the bowl on her bum and eat whatever I was going to eat. And that was quite good, because it just then meant it was one less thing that I had to do in the 10 to an hour and 10 minutes that I would have where I wasn't holding her and didn't need to be feeding her. And like, you start to become really pragmatic of like, okay, what am I going to do in my next gap? Am I going to go to the toilet? Am I going to shower? Am I going to eat? Am I going to do laundry? Or am I going to change? What am I going to do with that time? Or do I want to feel productive? Or, you know, do I want to do something nice, like have a bath? Like, you start to kind of, I feel like I ended up planning what I was doing in my next break. But anyway, I ramble on. So postpartum, so I've talked about healing process down there. I've talked about clothing and what you kind of want to be wearing. I've talked about feeding in a bit more detail. And then the last thing, I guess, is like, and everyone will say this to you, but like, don't put pressure on yourself. Everyone's healing process takes a different amount of time. In the UK, we say it takes 6 to 8 weeks normally. You may feel great before then. You may still not feel healed after 6 months. Like, as I say, the fact that it has got the same term for everyone doesn't do justice to how different everyone's experience is. So don't rush yourself. Don't try and do more than you feel up to. But at the same time, if you do feel up for doing stuff, don't let people force you to stay in bed. Like, if that's not how you want to heal, if that's not how you want to recover, don't do that. But what I would say is I definitely overdid it after my second. As I said, we were moving house and we had lots to do. I knew that we were doing too much, because as you move, and I say exercise, it's kind of loose term. I guess I literally mean like go for a walk. If you do any, like a lot of movement, it forces your, it basically makes you bleed more. So your period effectively gets heavier because you're losing more blood. I don't understand the full science of why that works, but so on a day that I was like at home, chilling, whatever, I might have like one maternity pad in the morning, change at lunch, and then have another maternity pad in the afternoon. If we were out and about, I would be like going through one every like 2 hours, if that. I would change it much more regularly, because I was like forcing that process to happen really quickly. And that's not to say that like movement is bad. I think as soon as you feel up to it, go for a walk. Getting fresh air is just magical. I say, like, my first baby was born in February. On her fifth day of life, we had to go to her first midwife appointment. And because it was COVID, we had to go to the clinic. They didn't come to us. So I was too scared to drive, or like for us to be in the car, so we walked. It was literally at the end of our road, so it couldn't have been much closer anyway. I think it would have been more complicated to drive. So we walked, and that was like a 10-minute walk there and 10-minute walk back, and that was really nice, and that felt really positive, and that felt like a really good thing. And yes, I bled a bit more, but that wasn't necessarily a bad thing. It was kind of like helping the healing process. And so after I'd done that, I felt that going just for like a 10 or a 15-minute walk each day was really good. And then I kind of just built that up the better I felt. So from 10 minutes to 20 minutes to half an hour. And that really became a big part of my kind of healing process, was mentally feeling better, getting outside, getting fresh air for both of us. It's really good for the baby as well, for them to know when it's daytime versus nighttime. But I really found that like that kind of easing into normality, which I think happens, or I say normality, I mean new normal, but it kind of between 6 and 12 weeks was really about sort of building back up to being able to feel slightly on top of life, I guess is sort of what I mean. So those first 6 weeks are just survival, and just do what you gotta do. Like if that means shower, excellent. If that means don't shower for 3 days, excellent. Like you just keep you and the baby alive, and really get someone else to keep you alive, and you keep the baby alive, and that's it. From that 6 to 12 weeks, that's when it's like, okay, I can start to move, I can start to get into a rhythm, I can start to shower, I can start to feel a bit more. So by 12 weeks, you're like, okay, I can do this, I've got this, we're in our rhythm, we're in our groove. That is obviously going to be different depending on what support you have. It's going to be longer if you have less support. It's going to be potentially quicker if you have more. I had our mum around for the first month, and then my other half was around for the first 2 months for the first one, and 5 months for the second one. But we then had 2 kids, and we were moving house, and it was a lot more complicated. So, but yeah, so I think my first pregnancy was probably a better example, that I had my mum and my husband for the first month, and then I had my husband for the second month. And so it just meant that by 8 weeks, I could leave the house on my own, I could do things, I could get around, I could feed in public, which were all huge milestones. But I think that without that support, those things would have taken longer. It's not a race, it's not a competition. It's just, these things take time, right? Like this isn't about being back to normal in 3 weeks. You just gotta work out. And as I say, like, and that's with, I had very minimal damage from birth. So any addition on top of that, like, just like your healing process is your healing process. Whether that takes 6 months, whether it takes a year, whether it takes 5 years, like, just take things at your pace until you feel comfortable. And if something doesn't feel comfortable and doesn't feel right, get help. Ask someone. Or call me.